Thank you so much, Bruce. Gary and Laura, it's such a pleasure to get to sit down with you both and talk about the topic of the economics of cultural districts. You approach this work from very different angles, and so I'm excited to kind of unpack this because there's a wealth of knowledge within both of these people. In some cases, the deep academic and research-based work, and then the true lived experience and really building a cultural district as we speak, in Laura's case. But I actually want to begin first with Dr. Wagner to talk a little bit about how you, as an economist, how you got into this field of study and research around cultural districts in the first place, because as I understand it, it wasn't your intent in the first place. This hasn't been your specific focus in your research. So just tell us the story of how you got here.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Are we on? Okay, good. So thanks, Sam. It's a bit of an interesting story. I think Sam has heard it, which is probably why he wanted me to repeat this. I moved to Acadiana in 2018. At the time, I had never heard of a cultural district. I had never lived in a state that had a cultural district. I was driving in my car from home to the university to go to work, and I heard something on the radio. They said Macomb Vise neighborhood had just been designated a cultural district, and that people should look out.
It was probably Tina on that carry, yes.
Tina's responsible for me. And then the person on the radio said, look out, residential real estate prices in the neighborhood are going to take off. And I'm a professional skeptic. I thought, there's no way that's going to happen. But I had access to the multiple listing service data from the Acadian Association of Realtors. So I said, well, I know how to study this. So my colleague, who's actually in the back of the room, Javier Portillo, and I started looking into this, and the first thing we did is looked at how residential real estate prices in areas that were very similar to cultural districts in Lafayette Parish, but not designated districts, how the designation affected residential property values. And what we found actually surprised, I think, both of us. We found that residential property values within cultural district boundaries increased 7% after the designation. And so that we have a nice result. The paper actually published really well in the academic literature, and that kind of started us down this path of looking more broadly into a number of different questions related to cultural districts. But it was really just my skepticism of hearing this on the radio that now, 7 or 8 years later, has me working a lot in the cultural space.
Absolutely, and so but before we pass to Laura to learn a little more about her background and approach into this, when you say something like a 7% difference in property values, would you think of that as a significant impact at an economic development scale or just an economic scale?
Yeah, I think it's a very significant impact from an economic perspective. I would say that the cultural districts around the state of Louisiana, we have more, I think it's around 130 now, give or take, more than any other state. 127, exactly. I was close. Most of the districts tend to be in areas that are a little bit less residential, and residential property values are a little lower on average than outside of the districts. But a 7% increase closed the gap quite a bit. And I would expect, from my just past experience, I was thinking maybe a number of 2 or 3% would be something that we would find. 7 was pretty large. But I think it's a signal, we could probably come back to the various points in the discussion, that the designation of an area as a cultural district or a cultural hub, depending on how states do it, has been a real signal that people value that, and they're willing to make investments in those particular areas because they see some value from that I'm sure we'll touch on later.
Absolutely, and before we leave just the hard numbers side of it, I know you've explored more than just property values at this point. And found other correlations, whether it comes to short-term rentals, and also just business activity. And what I thought was really fascinating in your research was how much of that actually impacts existing businesses instead of just new kind of out of market or out of town businesses cropping up. I feel like that was a very interesting piece of information, because also when we talk about creation of cultural districts, there could be a fear too of appropriation of culture, or taking something that is natural and putting kind of a brand on it that makes it more artificial. But it was interesting to see in the data how much it really supports truly the existing population, the existing people.
Yeah, so you're going to have me chronologically talk about all these different projects, but when we found this very significant effect with residential real estate, the next step we thought about was what's happening with employment. Are we seeing more jobs, more income? So this second study that we looked at, we actually looked at cultural districts across 5 different states. So we looked at Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, Iowa, and Maryland. And you're probably thinking, well, why did you pick those 5? They're the 5 states that tie some sort of financial incentive to businesses that are located in cultural districts. So we thought, well, if you're going to find an employment effect, it's probably going to be in a place where there's a financial incentive. And that's actually what we found. The strongest effects were in Texas and in Louisiana, and we found that employment in cultural industries, so capturing the whole value chain from production, manufacturing, distribution, we found employment increased about 2.5%. And that, to Sam's point, it wasn't because of new cultural establishments moving into an area, it was benefiting the existing cultural firms. So that the establishments that were already in the areas before the designation were the ones that experienced the employment bump. And then the kind of next study we thought about that as well. We wonder if these districts are attracting more visitors. So we looked again, this is Louisiana specific data, but we used data on Airbnb listings because we thought, well, we want to have a market value indicator of whether people value this, not a survey where somebody would respond and say, yes, I value this activity. We want to see, are people willing to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. And when we looked at Airbnb rentals within Louisiana before and after districts were certified, we found that in the first 2 years, there's about 11% increase in the price people were willing to pay for Airbnb rentals. We didn't find any evidence it was attracting new outsiders, but the people who were coming to the region were willing to pay a premium. And so that, again, at least to me as an academic economist, is consistent with the idea that people were viewing these districts being certified as generating amenities. Sam will describe it in a more eloquent way.
Fun stuff to do.
Yeah, amenities basically meaning things that people value. So these districts were generating things that people value, they were willing to pay for it. And for a typical Airbnb rental, it amounted to about an additional $3,500 over a 2-year period, which is certainly not insignificant. So the districts on the whole, according to the studies that we've looked at, lead to places that are more desirable for people to live, they increase employment, and they also attract a premium for people who are visiting short term. So there are, very significant economic drivers from a place-based perspective, meaning you just have a little boundary, we're trying to increase economic activity. They seem to be very viable tools for doing that.
So now that we've talked about the general terms, let's talk about the specific. So Laura, the 127th cultural district in the state of Louisiana is the Railroad Avenue Cultural Historic District in Jeanerette. So you are the founder, you've brought this about through no small labor, and it's more than just the creation of it. Tell us about how you came to create this designation, but really what you're doing with it too, because it is not just a stale designation on a map. You are doing something much more alive than just defining the boundary. So tell us about your work.
Thank you very much. Is it on?
Yes, it's on. Just keep it close.
It started in a setting where individuals actually said, there's history here and we don't know anything about it. Not being a history buff, it was probably the subject I made the worst grade in. But as individuals began to talk about the community, the railroad track served back in the day and time as not only something for the economic development of the city of Jeanerette, but also as a demarcation line. And if you've heard of what was called many years ago the Chitlin Circuit, did someone say yes? Okay.
Yeah.
Then individuals that could not perform or sing or bring their art and talent to Main Street America, it was on the other side of the tracks. So as this group sat, we were in pretty much an informal fellowship setting at a church, and they said, well, you know, there's history, and there's history on both sides of the track. However, to learn that President Bush's son, before he was elected president, visited several times a store called Marjorie's Grocery. Marvin Gaye did several stops in Jeanerette, Louisiana. We had a famous boxer.
Y'all had a good thing going on.
Pardon me?
Y'all had a good thing going on.
Yeah, we had some history. So individuals said, let's pull this together. We had, and I'm told because some historians or individuals, preservers of history said, hey, I forgot to mention this, and we have all of these sheets of paper with things that people remembered taking place in that particular part of town. And it only spans about, it's a neighborhood, because the area has more homes than businesses. But the history was so rich, and they said, this is capital, Laura, because people don't know it. And when Christmas time rolled around from one of our meetings, and this historical church, are you familiar with Lejeune Bakery? This is in Jeanerette. This historical church was older than Lejeune Bakery, and we thought nothing in town was older than Lejeune Bakery. And then in another setting, another church said, oh no, we're even older than that, than the United Methodist Church. And as all of these stories began to unwind, someone said, we're going to have a book, because so much of the history of this little community, so much of the rich history, even having Gabi Fontanet, who's believed to have been the fabricator of the sugarcane loader, okay? And farmers have said that this gentleman put the mule to rest. He retired the mule because he used Model T engines and came up with this contraption, God forbid me that word, but came up with this device to lift the sugarcane out of the loader. So we've come up with quite a bit of information that now the group is saying, hey, let us put this in some form to share with the community and to share with history buffs and individuals, because Jeanerette has a history book, but so much of the, where the bayou runs straight, because the bayou test runs through Jeanerette. And it is at that point in Jeanerette where it does not curve or bend, it runs straight. And in the book, individuals have shared nothing that has been shared in these oral history settings is in the book. So I also serve on another historical district in the city of Jeanerette. That's right, only 4,500 strong. That might be counting some of our chickens and what have you. But with the kind of excitement this information has brought about, we just thank Baton Rouge for coming and visiting and saying, you all have something here.
And I think that, so you started with a book and started with a curiosity about telling the history of it. But also in practical terms today, what's happening in RRAHCD, what's happening in the Railroad Avenue Historic District. So what is happening now? Like, what is it? What are the amenities to define it? What does it look like in terms of a week and a month in the Railroad Avenue District today that y'all are doing? That's different than before.
It's really, you're an economist, and I thought to myself, my goodness, what am I going to say? What can I do? What can I share? I'm with an endowed economist. And someone said, but Laura, you're a living testament to what it has taken to get from point A to point B. And we've had donors to come forward, identifying several individuals who blazed the trail, so to speak, in Generette. They had businesses, they were educators, they were pastors, they were business persons. And we had these banners mounted on electrical poles, and to have seen individuals come from out of town because someone says, hey, your auntie, hey, your grandmother, your grandfather's on a banner in what they're calling, I think it's a district or historical, or until, because it's a pretty long name, Railroad Avenue Historic Cultural District. Individuals actually were coming to town to see their loved one on the banner. And to see someone stand there and shed a tear and say, I didn't know this, because we put little QR codes on them so you can scan it and it gives you some information about them. After we had a meeting in December, even Amtrak was excited. They would blow the horn and blow the horn and blow the horn because someone said, hey, and we don't have like a board per se, we have a team. And the team is called the Revitalization Vision Team. And because we started with maybe 20 people, and then we grew to 40 people, and then 50 people attending our oral history gatherings. But when a lady left and she said, we're going to decorate this church for Christmas, because this church is a landmark in the community. And surely, we had lights that were donated, and if we could have thrown pictures up here, it would have been great. But Amtrak would pass, and I mean, everyone said, oh, how long is this going to, how long are you all going to keep the lights up? But individuals came from different parts of South Louisiana that I'm aware of to see this church so beautifully lit. It had Gothic windows, and we had the great support of Clico. They came out with their crew and helped to mount the lights and all. It was just absolutely beautiful. So this year we're going to do Christmas cards with them and try to generate some funds.
And we're all coming, so don't worry.
Please, everyone's invited for the lighting this year. And I must say that we've got the first African American landmark to be on the National Registry. Wow. Church of God in Christ. And that was such an exciting time for our community. And it's one of maybe 3 in Iberia Parish. So, Generette's on the National Historic Registry.
That's incredible. So, I think, what you're illustrating too is the reality of, what it is you're not creating the culture, you're exploring the culture. You're telling the stories of the culture. So, and I think it's really interesting and this really kind of comes back to Gary to talk about just what do we mean when we talk about culture in these spaces. I think it's interesting to look at the process of understanding the strengths that exist in really any community, in their history, their identity, their culture. It's not just, it doesn't have value on its own, it has value when people are connected to it, see it, participate in it. History in and of itself, of course, it's stuff that happened. The exploration of it, the telling of stories, those are the things that, I see just in your case study, Laura, they are the things that create a stronger community and activate people to do the things that become, a community worth investing in, worth spending time in, worth bragging about, worth visiting. So I think I just want to throw back to Gary too to talk about, amenities is one way to think about it. But it's more than just amenities, isn't it? Is there a degree to thinking about the identity, even just as a brand or an understanding of a place? Can you explore that from the Federal Reserve perspective?
Was at the Federal Reserve before coming here, so I'm not an expert on identity or culture, so I would actually kick that one back to you. I would think, the way I would think about answering the question that's being posed is if you think about cultural identity and what our research has shown is it's something that people value. Like they're willing to spend their resources, they're willing to spend time, they're willing to make those kinds of investments in areas that have a cultural identity. So clearly, just from an economic development perspective, it's something that people really do actually value. But it's different from, again, I think people can say one thing. I think it's always important to look at how people actually behave and not necessarily what they say. And the way people actually behave is they've demonstrated routinely that these are amenities that we really value. So I would say that forming that cultural identity is important. I mean, one of the things that's probably maybe less clear to people who have always been from this region. I've lived in 7 different states, and when I came here, it's very clear that culture means a lot more than it does in other places I've lived. And you pick that up very quickly. And so I think it's also just interesting that it's something that is very unique here, and it's something that people really also value very highly.
And I think back to Laura, I think people take for granted that they don't have a strength to build on. You know, if somebody was looking at places that have, you know, maybe did this kind of work decades ago and have invested in themselves for years and years and years, and a small community of, you know, 4,500 residents in 2024 might look at other places and say, either, look, we're so far behind in other areas, you know, in this particular area that there's no way we're catching up, so why bother? Or I think people can say, yeah, well, they're successful there because they have something we don't have, too. And I feel like in your approach to this work, too, you know, you're dismissing those two kinds of notions. One, that you have something to build on, you just have to explore it. And two, that there's no time like the present, you know. the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago, the second best time right now. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, the cultural capital was there, and it became dormant. And once we began to talk about, and individuals began to share stories about all of the businesses that once existed. And by the way, we just had another business to open like on the little fringe part that you read of our district. And so we'll be able to talk about that part of economics, okay? We did have a business to come to town. But individuals began to buy into it. And when we would have our settings, take for instance, we have, right now, we have an artist call, and it's for a mural that's going to be on what was once Marjorie's Grocery, which is where so many prominent individuals, when they came to Generate, they came on this side of the tracks. This is where they stopped. This is where they visited. This is where, right here, and he plays in this area. Wayne Blueburns, a Grammy winner from the area. And I'm hoping we can get our government to designate his little street as Wayne Blueburns Street. Who knows Wayne Blueburns? He plays jazz, but he received a Grammy playing Zydeco with Clifton Chenier. We've got individuals who have made significant contributions in the field of education. We will be designating an area within the district as Teachers Row. 19 educators came from this little one street, 2 streets over. So it's called Educators Row. And the emphasis was that on the fact that education played such a crucial role in this hub. Additionally, we've got stories that our individuals, we did a mural, in addition to the mural that we've been commissioned to have an artist to do. And the oldest painter that contributed to the mural was 89 years old. And then she brought with her grandchildren. And they were just mesmerized to hear the stories as they unfolded. So it's an ongoing project, and it's as though it was just dormant, and now it is becoming so alive.
And I want to open up to questions in a few minutes, but I want to recognize the context that we have this conversation in as well. We are here in the downtown Lafayette Cultural District. This is a facility, the Acadiana Center for the Arts, that was built after that district was designated to create another amenity, to create another space that serves to grow the economy, grow the impact, bring people together, tell the stories of what makes us human, what keeps us alive, what keeps us connected. The work of a cultural district is just the work of creating a community in a specific place. That's how I think about it. And of course, how do you get that community to come together? You've got to tell them where it is. You've got to tell them, how to show up, when it's happening. You've got to have things to invite them to. All of the things that may look like performances or a festival or the creation of a piece of public art or any number of things, anything in those ways that might be looked at as just activity that is happening because, that's what people are doing for fun on a weekend. But what it's really doing is it's helping build the community, and it's helping people participate actually in the creation of an economy, because that economy is how goods and services are exchanged, where people find it valuable to live, and all of those things I think are just, maybe it's obvious to everyone in the world, but I so often think of the arts as a element that is seen in our economic circles and in state government, you name it, as a want, not a need. But then when you turn around and look at what is it that people need in order to build a sustainable life, build a career, build a space where they want to raise a family, what they need so often is found in the cultural spaces, and that they're willing to move across the country to be a part of, or will refuse to leave because they're so tied to it culturally. Gary, you've got a microphone in your hand. Looks like you want to use it.
May I add something to this? I'm certain Lafayette, being a big city that you all are in, you're familiar with Love the Boot, and it's a day or weekend when you say, hey, we're going to clean our community, it's litter abatement time and all. Lieutenant Governor Nungesser gave us a thumbs up. We had 80 people to show up to say, hey, let's beautify the Railroad Avenue Historic Cultural District. And I'm not familiar with whether or not they report attendance, but that was pretty significant for a community the size of Jeanerette. And this is our third year. We had the support of Walmart, we had the support of other businesses, and the farmers came out, because we've got a historic cemetery. And instead of having it overgrown with grass and what have you, we tackled it. And the history that's right in that cemetery, it was really mind-blowing to see headstones, early 1800s, and that fired individuals up. So, yes, I am a practitioner, I am the liaison, here's the economist, but I'm in the midst. We're in the midst of it all, and it has taken quite a bit of PR, quite a bit of promoting it, and have they given me an account on the number of individuals, because you all wouldn't have been able to come in here without your railroad smartphone. But doing that, it's really been funny, because individuals at a meeting surprised me with, yes?
There we go. There we go. I'm sorry, I won't be able to stay much longer after our setting. I have to visit a dear friend. But it's been, she would tease me and say, it's a labor of love for you. And
as a labor of love for the community, and we all love our communities. And when you've grown up there, and then you realize, I didn't understand all that is here and what has sustained this community, what has sustained it. And it's the love of these 80 individuals that showed up for this cleanup day. And I said, gosh, that was some kind of party we had, you know. But to have the Lieutenant Governor to give us a thumbs up on social media, and my phone just kept ringing, and because I don't do the social media for the district, it's a couple of other individuals who handle Facebook and handle Instagram, it is. But I am what you might consider the train whistle.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gary, I'm going to ask you for some kind of preliminary closing thoughts about what is it that you've found in this that I think, if you were speaking besides this room, that is probably the choir, people who support it. But what message should anybody here feel very comfortable and grounded in sharing out to their skeptical friends?
That's a great question. I was going to touch on that anyways. Nice segue after what both of you mentioned. I think often we would think about, or one might think about, the arts as something that's extra, maybe not essential, and that it can't drive a region. And I think the research that Javier and I have done show that that is absolutely not the case. And in fact, it can be an essential piece and an important piece of driving an economy forward. Just leaving you with one number that surprised me when I looked this up for Louisiana. There's about 50,000 jobs related to the art and cultural industry across the entire state. It's 4 times as large as agriculture.
Wow.
I didn't expect to see that when I found it in the data, but I think the takeaway that I would give, and that Sam and I have given a talk at the Louisiana Arts Summit to a broader crowd, is that the arts can be an important and essential piece of economic development. It's important also, I think, for other reasons, but people would often dismiss it from the economic perspective and think, well, this isn't something that you can use to move your community forward. It's just a nice thing to have to look at. No, it absolutely moves the community forward, and it's something that people value and are willing to spend a lot of money to support.
And I think my last specific thought before we open it up for questions, and I hope you'll have something there, because there's a lot of knowledge contained in these two people, is also there's so many factors when it comes to what affects local economy. And you are at the whims of most of them. But when we talk about cultural economy and what you do to invest in your own storytelling, your own community building, and that culture and the space that you make around culture, that is something that can effectively only be done locally. And of course, it's a lever that every community has, whether or not they've used it before, or they're just starting to, or they've mastered it. Maybe mastered it 50 years ago. Every community has it and has the ability to use it, but they have to have the will and the knowledge and the team too. So I'd like to open it up for questions from the crowd, and I'll walk the microphone around, Suzanne. Incredible artist, Suzanne Juno.
Very loudly. As an artist, I have seen across the United States as well as here.
Please speak into the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They
Okay.
may not be able to hear you. Okay.
I have seen across the United States and here that when an area draws their artists together, as we did a number of years ago when we started Art Walk, we had tremendous numbers of galleries because the rent was cheap. We don't have them anymore because the rent is so expensive. And they're being chased out. We have an organization right now in Lafayette that is looking to find a place to move to, and yet the affordability is not there anymore. Is there a way that the government could help us fund spaces to a certain extent? Originally, I'm a member of Louisiana Crafts Guild, and originally
I'm a director or founder of Louisiana
a
Crafts.
founder, okay. And when we began, went to see everybody, and we saw the mayor, and we saw Atleta, and we saw everybody, and they ended up sending us to LCBC, and, not C, I'm sorry, the other organization. And they basically came up with the Sanssouci building, which we rented for $300 a month. And that's why we are still here, because we had a very small overhead, and we could afford to be able to hire a professional person to be in the gallery to help our artists sell their work. You know, it's getting harder and harder. Is there anything that you have seen across the country that can be brought here into Louisiana and Lafayette specifically that could help that situation go back to where it was before?
Great question.
Yeah, thanks for saving the easy questions for me. That's a really difficult one, and I haven't found anything in our research along the lines that you are pointing to. I mean, what you're signaling is really a local priority. I mean, you know, do we have the ability to do that? Of course we do, but you'd have to, you know, find out what LCG's priorities are and what they want to do. I think what you identified, though, is, I won't call it a dark side, but let's say something that can typically happen when you have neighborhoods that revitalize is what draws people in then can eventually push people out. And so that is something that happens. I mean, the academic term is gentrification. And so it's ironic where certain activities can draw you in and then it ends up repelling things. I think locally, my suspicion would be Sam's probably a great person, well connected, there's a nice space here. I think culture is strong enough that there are probably people who are willing to volunteer time and space if we could just make those connections, and I'm certainly not the person to do that.
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna come up here and then put up here.
Hello, it is I, your inspiration. So my question, thank you for doing the research, honestly, because what you have is the quantitative data of like what it really takes to, you know, make economic impact. And at the community level, we can't afford to do that, right? So I appreciate you doing it. And how do I get a copy of the report so that I can compare it to my quality of life notes? But also just to hear the data, to hear the impact with the increase in the economic power, the increase in housing. And, you know, I focus heavily on quality of life within the community. So be able to see those things, so we can see the qualitative, right? So people are happier, you know, they're taking care of their houses, they're applying for state tax credits to make repairs to their commercial businesses. But to actually see it in number form, I think would be beneficial for us as a community to show that we're actually, we have potential to make more progress.
I think that's a great idea. I'm going to put Sam on the spot and also Javier. So what do you say, Sam, that Javier and I can sort of condense this information down, maybe we can make a nice infographic that we can share?
I would love to do
What those
it.
results are.
As long as Javier does all of the work.
He knows.
You know, it's one of the points of having this event is it's not just having the conversation in the room. It is about what are the action steps we need to take coming out of these conversations that can make a difference in the conversations we have outside of this space. And what are the tools and resources we need to be able to have those conversations the right way. I had a question back here.
Thanks, Sam. I have a question for either one of you, panel, or both of you. I'm a musician. I love the blues. Familiar with the Chitlin circuit that you mentioned. I went on a blues pilgrimage to try to find the existing juke joints that were still in the country, and there are just a couple left, so get with me later, we'll share those. I got a two-part question. I've heard of General, of course, I've probably been through there maybe once. What is the festival of the city or the town? And also you mentioned the Chitlin circuit. Is General mentioned in the Negro Motorist Green Book? In the Green Book? Yeah, is it?
I have a relative that has an original green book,
Oh, wow.
and General is not mentioned,
Okay.
okay? So But, yes, Generette has a festival around March that's called the Creole Festival.
Creole?
I just happen to be, play an integral part in a festival that has really grown because I promised someone, I said, well, the Strawberry Festival started out really small, but it is a huge festival. And the festival is called the International French Bread Festival. And yes, we had individuals to come from different parts that we had of Louisiana because they said it just sounded so interesting, you know? But talks are underway as to, right now it is held under the pavilion on Main Street in Generette, and attendance has grown from, let's see, the first year it was like 3,500, and last year it was over 4,200 based on what, and this is Little Generette, it exceeded our population, the attendance.
It started in 2023.
It started in 2023, that's correct. And of course, it's Zydeco music, and Wayne Blueburns, we've been asked to bring him back. And I think he's from the Lafayette area. I am so sorry. I thought I had put this. Would you stop it? I thought I had put it on
This is a
silent.
test here.
Others can operate this phone better than I can. But there's talk about maybe considering having it in the Railroad Avenue Historic Cultural District. Okay? So we'll know all of this is in the making for this year as well. But did I answer your question?
Oh, yes, ma'am, thank you.
Okay. I was told that Generette was not in that motorist book.
Probably not that they weren't, it just didn't get listed. I'm sure they all had areas in their little.
Yes, we had the Casablanca, we had so many places on Railroad Avenue, I was told, that accommodated Tina Turner,
Right.
Irma Thomas, you name it, that came through Generette.
Jessica?
So I come from a nerdy downtown background, and I think a lot of conversation around cultural districts also has history, which is wonderful, but a lot of times history and infrastructure don't work very well together as far as physical infrastructure. I would love to know from both of your perspectives of bringing people in, but also bringing investment in, when it's a little bit harder to do that in the urban core where there's very old infrastructure, it's not greenfield, it's more expensive to do. How do we take the lived experiences and the historical context in conjunction with the economical side to encourage an investment both from a residential standpoint and a commercial standpoint?
Easy question.
Casual, sorry.
Well, I think, I think that just signals priorities for the people who are, local government officials who are making those decisions. Because if you look at the kind of broader regional economic research, all really successful regions have an urban core. And I think the urban core is very important. I think our urban core is very important. I mean, I was really surprised when I moved here and learned about the infrastructure challenges that were here, and basically it was allowed to deteriorate to the point where now it's in really bad shape. The question, it can be fixed, it has to be a priority. And so for whatever reason in the past, it just hasn't been a priority. And I think I don't know enough about the local history to know why that hasn't been a priority, but it certainly is something that could be fixed. I think from an identity perspective, it's important to keep the urban core intact. I mean, regions that are successful all have them. And I think, we've got sort of retail corridor in town, but that doesn't really have much of an identity. And I think the identity is here.
I could appreciate your question about housing artists. I actually asked our mayor, with our call going out, and we've had artists to apply, even though the guidelines stated artists from Louisiana. only should apply. But we had artists who applied from Europe, Australia. Generate is a household name now. and even from the continent of Africa. We had applications to come in from so many areas and all from across the USA. And so I said, Mayor, what are we going to do if the artist comes from Lake Charles and we're giving them 35 days to complete the mural, where are we going to house them? And he said, well, I think you have an extra bedroom. I said, well, I was thinking about your place, Mayor. So I can appreciate what you're saying, but on that note, someone else in the community said, well, we'll work that out. You know, we'll house the gentleman or the lady, because we're at our 3 finalists, and one's from New Orleans, and the other one is from Lake Charles, and another artist is from Houma. So for them to come into Generate and complete this mural, where are they going to stay? And the commission work is only for $10,000. So that is definitely a concern that I can appreciate.
We have another comment back here, and then I'm going to have Chris give us the final question.
I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated how the storytelling was a part of y'all's process in growing your culture, and I just think it would be really cool to see it as part of the festival. I think that's important to tell the stories of Generate, because I don't know them, and I would love to know them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
May I please put your name and number and everything? See, when you step out and you're in my presence, I don't let you go. I need you on the team.
Thank you. This maybe points to the future or possible collaboration. I don't think you've answered this already in your economic research, but perhaps you have. Which is, you know, I imagine you've looked at so many 127 cultural or economic districts around the state. Some of them, on average, there was a positive outcome, but some of them surely were very strong, and some of them maybe not much outcome at all. I'd love to see if you can identify factors that affect the success of the district. You know, be able to hone in and narrow down like what does it take to do that successfully, and maybe even what shows the biggest impacts for future guidance.
Get on that, Javier. Any closing comments from either of you?
Just a quick response to the question. I think you hit the nail on the head, is trying to identify what those specific elements are. It's a lot harder to track that down because different districts are doing different events. They have, it's just really hard. There's no unified source to grab that and say, oh, they had this many events, they had this many people. So I would love to know the answer to that as well. I just think it's really hard to do.
May I ask a question also? Sure. But in response to what you're asking, I think, and you use the word buy-in, I think, when you've got a product and you believe in it, and someone told me, you can sell snow in Alaska, Laura, but it's getting individuals to understand the value that exists. We're not really creating, we are expanding, and individuals said, hey, this sounds doable. This sounds, because we want to see this come about. So, yes, I didn't realize I was also going to become a promoter. My question to you, please, Dr. Wagner. In communities like Railroad Avenue, where our cultural assets existed long before formal recognition, how can you great guys, you're economists, measure the value of cultural identity, measure the value of historical preservation and measure the value in community pride as contributors to what we're hoping to become long-term economic gain.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly ways you can do that. It's pretty complicated to describe and probably more technical than we want to get into. But, I mean, you can think of an easy analogy for this is thinking of a sports team. So if we take, say, the New Orleans Saints, well, there's some community pride that comes from the New Orleans Saints, and so people have tried to figure out how can you place a dollar value on that. And there has been work in art and cultural economics trying to value what that is to the community. I think the easiest thing that Javier and I did, because I'm not that smart, he's probably smarter than I am. You know, we picked the obvious things that we could measure really easily first. The more difficult questions are the things that you just posed about the broader value to the community, the questions about which specific things are driving that. That's, you know, the next 5 years worth of work, so maybe we'll get back to you.
Now, I don't have your email address.
I'm really hard to find. You can Google Gary Wagner, Louisiana.e. That's it.
Well, we'll look forward to the report out in 5 years, but in the short term, we're going to be very happy to share out some more information from this session. But I just wanted to thank both of our panelists. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Gary. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for being part of the conversation. Please stick around, visit the panelists if you can. We'll be beginning the keynote very, very shortly downstairs in the James W. Lucas Theater. Following that is a great reception, so you'll have more opportunity to share your thoughts, discuss, and keep this conversation going forward.